be building today is a framed staple and just the core. What we're going to need, or what I'm going to use, is a tape measure, and I'll explain to you why I'm using this rather than just drawing something out down below me here. Sharp flush cutters, they're optional. I tend to use construction grade scissors now for that. Nylon tip pliers, again, it's optional. If you have toothless pliers, they'd work just as good. You have to be just a little bit more delicate with them though. And a pair of pliers. We're going to use this to stretch the ribbon out. So what we're going to do is we're going to take the tape measure out and we're going to pull out maybe about 30 inches, give or take, because we need enough room to stretch out 20 inches and have enough play on both ends to stretch out the ribbon, because we're going to be using 0.5 Canthaw. Canthaw for ribbon tends to be a little more curly. We want to straighten it out. Lightning Vapes also comes out with a lot of memory on the wire. We're going to be using 26 gauge frames. These are nichrome. So the Canthaw will take a little longer to ramp up, but it'll keep the resistance in check because we're going to be using 6-ply here. We're also going to be using 40 gauge just for the binder. This isn't going to be for part of the core other than just a binder. Another thing that's optional that I'm going to be using is hot glue and a little mini torch to melt it. You can use a hot glue gun if you prefer. I prefer not to because it worries me that I'm going to burn myself, burn something, or something will catch on fire. The cord's in the way, just a lot going on with it. So this just seems to work best for me, and I'll show you why I'm going to use this. Alright, so we got our ribbon wire and we're going to start prepping that. On the end, we're going to clip this off. We're going to use this for our binder. We're going to need a little bit more than that. So I'd say about 3 inches will do. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to clip that off. I'm going to set that to the side. We're going to save that. I'll explain to you why later here. Alright, so now that that's cut off, I'm going to grab my needle nose pliers. And I'm just going to grab the end, the tag end here, with the tip of the needle nose. I'm going to stretch it out 20 inches. We're going to do this 3 times. Now, to show you what I'm doing down here, this is going to be my third piece. We're stretching it 20 inches. We're going to have a 10-inch stick, and we only need 3 pieces of this because we're going to be folding them in half. These pieces are laying into the tape measure here, and they're cupped into it. So what that's going to do is going to make it easier for me to swoop them up and recover them. So I make sure that they're all kind of facing the same way. Because we have 20 inches across here, I'm just going to reach for the 10-inch, where the 10-inch marker is, and I'm going to pick them up. So now I've got these up, and they're just drooping down in my hands. I'm holding them right in the middle. I've got 20 inches of it. I grabbed it at the 10-inch, right in the middle of it, right off the tape measure, just swooped right into my hands, nice and easily. I'm going to take my fingers, and I'm just going to push them down that way. We're going to form a loop. This loop is going to attach to my fishing swivel hook, with the clip. So all I do here now is just kind of press it a little tighter, and they stay together by themselves. Now this is 0.5. This is a good place to start practicing. 0.5 would be the easiest to work with in my opinion, especially stacking wise. You don't really want to be using 0.8. That just usually don't work well to your favor, and the resistance is ridiculous. 0.4 is a little more difficult, and 0.3 I would imagine is even worse. So now we're going to take some 40 gauge and we're going to bind it up. I'm going to take a little piece of this 40 gauge off the spool here, and normally I got this little pieces sitting around, but 40 gauge just breaks. You can just break 40 gauge with your hand. Now I'm going to lift my thumb and stick this under it. All I do is just lift it like that, and I stick it under it. Now this loop is a little bit open too much. I like it closed a little bit more. So I'm going to lift my thumb up just a little bit like this, and I'm going to drop the wire into it, and I'm going to bind it up. this is going to be the end that connects to the swivel, like I said. So, and it's also going to stack all 6 wires together. It's like a 3-wire loop. Another good thing about the 40 gauge, like I showed you, I've got enough here where I can use it again. You just snap it and break it. If not, it cuts real easy too. It's not necessary. And another thing that I didn't bring up is I've got a little measuring cup of water here. I'm dipping my fingers in, and use some water and slide it down. You'll see that it holds everything together better. Helps the ribbon wires stick together and stack nicely. You take a little bit of stroke in there, but they lay together nicely, as you can see when you use some water. Some people use juice, some people will use their saliva. It doesn't matter. I mean, using water is probably the most sanitary thing to do. Juice, I guess, would be the next. But so now we're going to move on to the frames. Same thing. I'm going to stretch this out 20 inches, maybe a little bit more than 20 inches, so I can fold this in half right over the 10-inch stick of staples that I already have prepped. I'm going to give myself a little bit extra because we're going to lose some from the side that clips onto the end of the spool and hold it in place. And I want to make sure that I have enough. So now we're going to straighten this out. I'm just going to take the end. You should know how to do this by now, but if you don't, I'm going to teach you. You bend a 90-degree bend and the end here. You take your drill and you just stick that 90-degree bend in your drill, and we're going to spin this and straighten this wire out. If it were 28 gauge or 30 gauge, I would pull it and straighten it like I did with the ribbon, but 26 gauge gives you a little bit of a pain in the butt, so I decided just to spin the drill on it and straighten it out. So not much. Now that you did that, you can spin it backwards and you'll see the little twisting in there. Nothing bad, but you never want to let go of this. You want to hold on to you reach down and hold on to the wire next to the pliers. You let go of the pliers, and now your wire is straight. If you don't do that, your wire will come out wavy. Never let go of the pliers before you grab a hold of the wire. Alright, so now that I got the wire straightened out, I'm going to cut the bends off of it. We want this wire to be perfectly straight. I'm going to take a look at the other end of it. Everything seems to be decent down here. I'm going to drop this on my tape measure, and I'm going to grab it right down from the middle. So let's see what I got here. 21.5 inches, so 10.5, something like that. 10 3/4. I'm right towards the middle of it now. What I'm gonna do is, you see that I've got the loop right here. That's what I did. I've got my hands holding on to the 0.1 side of this ribbon, so the loop is facing me. I'm looking through the loop. And all I do is I take my fingers and I pinch onto that loop, and the 26 gauge now is rested onto the top of the loop. And what I do is I take these fingers and I bend it down. So you got something going on like that. It's not good usually to have these pushing down against something like I am right now, leaning on the camera, but I'll be able to work with it. And I'll take this, and I'm holding them together this way on the loop. The loop lets you hold it. And just give them a little pinch. Get that frame wire nice and flush up against the ribbon as good as you could. You just keep messing with it. It's a little difficult to do on camera rather than being up in my face because I'm half blind. But there we go. Now we're going to take some 40 gauge again, and we're going to bind this together. We're not worrying about all this stuff down here. We're going to get to that later. So you're probably thinking that looks like a mess below there. But so now I've got my other piece of 40 gauge, and I'm going to bind right over the binding spot I did before. But this time I'm going to be holding on to the to the frames as well. If I can hold on to the wire, oh, I never dropped it. So now I've got that. I'm going to lift my thumb, just like I did last time. And I'm going to bind it. The good thing I like that about 40 gauge is you can just snap it. It goes on nice. It doesn't want to bend up your staples. And you want to keep, when you're binding, you want to stay up as close as possible. I'll move my thumbs down, my thumb and finger down just a little bit and bind below it. So it's just biting onto it a little bit more. But everything is up close up there. You see that? Because that's where it's sturdy at. And if I were to go down further down this stick and try and fuse onto it, this wire would be bending and bending on me, and wouldn't be the best thing to do. You can sometimes work around it, but you know, it's best to leave the wire as straight as you can. So now that that's on there, I'm going to grab the nylon tip pliers and I'm going to flatten down. Again, I'm holding this, looking through the loop-in, so I'm going to be crimping down on the 0.1 side of the ribbon. So the flat side of the ribbon is with the frames on the side. We're not going to be squeezed on that. We're going to squeeze on the 0.1 side of the ribbon. So again, I'm going to be looking through the loop. That's what's facing at me. I'm going to give a little pinch down onto these wires. It's not absolutely necessary to do that up here. It's more important to do that little pinch trick for when you're doing your binding that are going to slide. These are stationary bindings up here. So you remember that piece of ribbon that we saved? Then we're going to take that and that's going to go on next. Same thing, we're going to be looking through the loop, holding onto the 0.1 side of the ribbon. I'm going to lift my thumb. Now we're going to do this up as close as possible to the end of the staple here. I'm going to lift my thumb up and I'm going to let it fall in between, and now I've got that trapped in there. So all I'm going to do is just take it and loop it around maybe about 8 times. Want it to be, you know, a ½ inch, something like that. A nice big wide slider. Run out of room there, so I'll slide it out of the way. So now that we got that, I'm going to trim the ends off of it a little bit. You know what, I can use a little bit more actually now that I'm looking at it. Just a little bit. So I'm going to trim the ends off here, and I'm going to show you what we're working with here now. Oop, wire flying everywhere. So here's how that looks. Now this don't want to slide and move around as much, so that's where the toothless pliers or the nylons will come in handy. And do the same way I told you to crimp for the top part of it onto the 0.1 side of it. Just give them not too hard of a pinch, but nice little snug pinches. That'll form the flat top there, and now I can slide this back and forth now. It's not gripping onto it. It took form to the wire. So now I'm going to slide this down just a little bit, and we're going to go ahead and we're going to put another piece of 40 gauge on here. That's going to be the slider behind this ribbon. I like to slide a piece of 40 gauge. It doesn't take up as much room versus having 2 big pieces of ribbon like this that takes up about a whole inch that you'll lose on the end here that you won't be able to fuse. So I feel that this is, you know, very, very important for a lot of these builds when you're applying pressure. So when you're applying pressure onto them, you know, and you've only got 40 gauge binded on there, and it's not spread out, it's not holding on to it enough, and these frames will like to roll over on you. Once you get better, you won't need to really use any bindings. You'll prep it better, and you can hold pressure back on it, and you get real light-handed, so you're not heavy-handed anymore, and you get better at it. But this is a way for you to learn how to do it. Start with 0.5 and do these methods that I'm teaching you here. You should be successful to starting out with the frame staple. You know, fusing maybe on some 36 gauge or 38 gauge. I wouldn't go any bigger than 36 gauge. 34 gauge, 32 gauge, that's just a little big. You know, I would imagine you can do it, but you know, I would start with 36 gauge maybe on it, and you know, maybe go to 38 gauge. That's a nice size gauge there for being on some frame staples. So, all right, so I have the hot glue and I have my mini torch. Don't put the fire directly on it. You don't want it to start turning black and smoking. I would imagine that's toxic. You want to heat this so it gets translucent. Then you're going to grab the core and just smear it on, and I'll show you the best way of getting it on. Hot glue can be a little bit stringy, and if you've never worked with it before, hey, we're out of fluid, so let's see if we melted it enough. So I need some more butane for the mini torch, so we're gonna have to do it this way. Do it the old-fashioned way. What we gotta do is just get this glue translucent, that's all. Like I said, you can use the hot glue gun, it works. I mean, I've got it sitting in my drawer, I don't use it. I like using that little mini torch, but that might be a better option than a lighter. Let's see how this goes. You see when it gets stringy like that, just run it around. That's gonna go into the drill chuck. So just let that cool off. Let me show you how this wire looks. It's prepped and stacked nicely. The frames are in place. I've got a binder wire in the middle. I've got the binder holding the loop on the end. Now to summarize this is going to clip into the swivels. I've got an LT spinner, but I took one of the clips off of my bearing swivels and I removed the bearing from it and popped that back on there. And this is going to slide right in there. 1, 2, 3. It drops right on and we're done. Everything stays in place down to the end here. We've got the hot glue. Now there's a few reasons for that, and I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to lift the camera up here and I'm going to show you. One of the bigger reasons for that being is, see that hole inside the drill chuck? This is a Makita drill. It's not a junk drill. They're not cheap. But some drills aren't as builder friendly as others. So keep that in mind. If you haven't bought a drill yet, you want to keep an eye on the drill that you pick up. I've seen some Craftsmans that close all the way up. I think I've seen a Ryobi that closes all the way up. But they tend to be the slower drills. This drill with a fully charged battery will hit up to 2300 RPMs. Yeah, there's no need for all that speed if you're a beginner builder anyways. This just happened to be what I have because I'm a plumber and I yanked it out of my work truck and it's never left the build station since then. So now the hot glue will go in the center here and allow your core to tighten up into here nice and tight, and it will center in there and it will wrap it like a gasket and center into it. So you don't want your core being wobbly. So when you're fusing it, you don't want your core jumping around, because when you're feeding the wire onto it and the wire's jumping, your core wire is jumping around because it's not centered, that's going to give you hell. So let me go ahead and drop this in here and show you this. So I'll just grab it by towards the end of the glue, open it up, and then I'll center it. So my finger is up against the metal and also up against the glue. And you'll see it just keeps, it'll crank down and bite onto it. Hear all that tightening? I mean, it'll still keep going. That's on there. It's not going to crunch your ribbon, nothing. It's in there and it's in there pretty good. See how it squeezed out of the top of the chuck? It completely gripped onto it. So, and for the other end, this is just a fishing swivel clip. Most of you probably just have fishing swivels to connect to. And it connects right in. We are done. So this is how I do it. There's many ways of setting up frame staples, many ways of stacking ribbon wire. This is just the way that I do it. I know other ways. I find this way to be the easiest way. You'll notice now, even looking over here, you see that coming apart over here. And you can just move your sliders and it'll hold it in place. And you can take some water again, and you know, if you're taking your time getting it prepped, just take some water again once you got it up on the top. And you want to keep pressure between these two here. I've got my vise anchored down and it's clamped down, it's not going anywhere. So there's a lot of different fusing techniques you can use on these. You can put a Suka over it, you can put an alien over it, people call that a Fralien. You can put staggered. Instead of just using naked frames, you could stagger your frames and then stagger fuse them, make a staggered fuse staple. Um, you could stitch an alien and put it over there. You can do interlock aliens over it. You can just it's endless what you can do over a staple. So once you get this down, if you have been struggling with stacking ribbon and prepping it with the frames, try this way. The way I grab a hold of it out of the beveled tape measure and it just hangs down, it just falls into place, for me at least. And I'd hope that it does the same for you. Just follow what I did. Thanks for watching.